Good day and welcome to Talking Health. I am Penny Maloney, the Health Promotion Coordinator, and it's my pleasure to be here with you for another episode of Talking Health. Just to let you know, this episode of Talking Health will be aired as usual via ZJB, and it will also be televised on the Government Information Unit Digital Channel 96. So welcome to both my listeners and of course our viewers. This special episode is being held in honor of World Mental Health Day. World Mental Health Day is a global awareness day that is recognized every October 10th. Here in Montserrat, our mental health team, they go a step further and honor the day with a whole week of activities. The theme for the week is Mental Health in an Unequal World. The theme was chosen to highlight a number of inequities that persons living with mental health challenges and illnesses face. Things such as poverty, sexual orientation, ethnicity create an unequal environment where persons are left to fend for themselves and be without care. Statistics show that 75 to 90% of persons living in low and middle income countries such as Montserrat have difficulties accessing care. Not only do they have difficulties accessing care, but where care is available, persons are stigmatized and discriminated against for accessing that care. So how can we level the playing field? Here to answer that question for us today is Mr. Adeboyega Bamisile. Welcome to Talking Health, Mr. Bamisile.
Thank you very much, Penny. It's my pleasure to be on Talking Health once again, and of course on occasion of World Mental Health 2021 celebration.
As I mentioned, you have a wealth of experience. You've been here locally with us for about 2 years now, so I'm certain that you can share with us what you have seen locally as it relates to inequities. What are the inequities that we see locally, and how do those inequities affect mental health and wellness?
Well, thank you very much, Penny. It's a pleasure. Let me first of all thank our viewers and our listeners at home who are with us. Apologies from my colleague, Chan Thompson, who would have joined me as a team member to have this robust discussion this morning, but he sent an apology because she's unwell. However, we would try as much as possible to address the issues at stake, and of course encourage all community members to participate in ensuring that the issue of stigma and discrimination is put to an end for mental health individuals or individuals living with mental health challenges amongst us. Before I go straight to your question, let me first of all make a preamble to allow our listeners at home and viewers to understand what mental health is all about. There are many determinants in our lives which influence our mental health, whether it's going to be good or it's going to be poor or it's going to be worse. The first is positive parenting, how we have a safe living as an abode where we live, the issue of abuse, whether we experience abuse, oppression, discrimination, or even poverty. These are the determinant factors as far as mental health issues are concerned. Now, these determinant factors are now again interacting with the inequalities across the globe that you would have mentioned in your preamble. These inequalities could be the issue of global society. This places some individual in far higher risk to develop mental health problems than the other. It might interest us to see that for African Caribbean, there are some data from empirical studies that show that men and women from African Caribbean communities, especially in the UK, have higher rates of PTSD, suicide risk, and are likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. These are recent studies in the last 2 years. The children of the poorest are likely to have mental illness at the age of 11 compared with the children of the wealthiest. Mm-hmm. Now, for inequalities across the world, individuals who, because of their social orientations and preferences, the LGBT individuals, are also at risk of developing common mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, suicide, compared to individuals who have chosen heterosexual preference. Okay, and of course, it could be more significant at an adult age, 55 years and above, and for age range between 35 years and below compared to middle age. I mean, the physically challenged are not left out of it. Any individuals who have physical challenges can also have a risk of developing mental health challenges. Now, if you put all this together, that underscores the importance of the inequalities you have read out according to the World Health Mental Health Federation for the celebration for this year. But it must be emphasized that the consequences of these inequalities range from continued unnecessary suffering and premature death for sufferers of mental health challenges, increased stigma and marginalization or discrimination, if you like to call it like that. In some countries, lack of investment in mental health projects and even resources, lack of treatment care, or decline in quality treatment care. These are some of the consequences or the outcome of these inequalities that we would like to see across the globe. Now, in relating with your question now specifically, what are the inequalities we have seen in our local environment in Montserrat? Okay, I would like to start with the issue of Montserrat has a multi-ethnic environment.
Yes, we do.
We see we have, apart from Montserratians, there are other nationals who have come to live in Montserrat. Predominantly, we have the Creole community, the people predominantly from Asians and other related communities. We have the Spanish community. Now, the issue of cultural variance is the first thing that actually could be responsible for this inequality. I'll give you an example. In certain communities like the Spanish community and the Asian communities, which is Creole, we found out that low level of education and sometimes unskilled labor has actually been the majority, has affected majority of the nationals from that communities. And you see, research from empirical studies has shown that low level of education and poor socioeconomic status could be a risk factor for mental health challenges. Okay, then again, the issue of language barrier. One of the inequalities you would have read is lack of access to treatments.
Yes.
It's not really that the treatments are not available, but language is a barrier.
So that's from our local community.
Exactly.
The service is available for them, but they don't
language is a
necessarily
barrier. From my experience in the last 2.5 years I've been in Montserrat, I found out that majority of the Spanish community or the Creole community, which the Asian community, would have come to therapy. I usually improvise to have a translator and an interpreter for the Spanish community. Majority of them do not have proficiency in speaking language of English.
Yes.
Okay, and again in mental health. For somebody like me, for somebody like other colleagues or professionals who are majorly English speakers, will have difficulties in assessing, will have difficulties in even intervention. So that is one inequality. The other one, like I mentioned, is about belief system, practices, and habits, which we have borrowed from a different culture. This can also affect either making people to turn into therapy or to even have the understanding that they are having mental health challenges. So the composition of the ethnic groups in Montserrat may have been one of the inequalities. Now, quickly, let me move to the socioeconomic status or class.
Yes, I wanted to ask a little bit about that, because what we see in the wider world is that, the lower middle income countries, access to mental health care seems to be majorly blocked off. So here in Montserrat, where we have a mental health unit, what is your perspective on that?
Well, let me quickly put it in proper perspective. When you talk about etiologies or causes, first of all, the inequality as regarding socioeconomic status is more pervasive. The services are available, but of course we all know that Montserrat is probably in low income or middle income country in terms of classification. If you look at the majority of our resident population, not average people are living above the world standard per capita income. Okay, again, that is one inequality. Even when the services are available, is free, but the impact of poverty, the impact of not having enough money which would have affected issues, especially for children, nutrition, what experience they are having in terms of their daily affair. All these add up together to determine who is likely to be affected by mental health challenges or not. And when you talk about socioeconomic status, that fits into that. We apart from the fact that our community is into low income or medium income, there are still some individuals who are having good income. They are living, you can say they are of high socioeconomic status, but predominantly or majorly, you see most individuals falling below per capita income. Okay.
Can I ask a question there about adults who would have grown up in poverty? At the beginning, you mentioned post-traumatic stress disorder in Caribbean people. Could that be one of the things that feeds into that? So you grew up in poverty as a child, you're an adult, maybe you are doing well now, but the effects of that may be affecting you now and causing those high levels of PTSD?
I don't want to say there's a hard and fast rule about that. Quite a lot of us grew up from poverty. At the end of the day, by the grace of God, we're able to go to school. We had a means end, and we're doing very well. We can say we're average in socioeconomic status. Depending on the interplay of some other factors, poverty would have made some children to be abused emotionally, physically, child labor. Poverty may have made some children to be disadvantaged, that they probably got raped or sexually harassed while growing up because their parent cannot afford to provide this for them, and they have to go to neighbors to get this or that. Okay, so it depends on the interplay of the factors. But essentially, when it comes to chronic or abject poverty, from the childhood, point of entry to life, nutrition plays a very significant role. Your availability of social amenities, availability of needs, the basic needs, clothing, feeding, shelter, play a very important role in developing traumatic stress later in the future or not, or even other categories of mental conditions. Okay, so there's no hard and fast way about individuals who have let me use myself as an example. I cannot confidently say my parents are wealthy when I was growing up, but along the line, depending on the support from the immediate environment, family support, if my father could not afford it, my uncle could afford something for me. I was able to move up. I went to school properly, even good schools, and at the end of the day, I went to university, do a master's degree, and I'm here today. Okay, but some are not lucky that way. I mean, depending on the interplay in the immediate environment, then we can begin to see issues later in life, or even problems that would have developed as the child is going along the line that will now come out full-blown later in life.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that we have that it's not necessarily just about being poor, it's about interconnecting factors.
Exactly. And that's why in my preamble initially I've said, well, poverty is a determining factor. But again, that will now interact with the other inequalities in the world. To now say, okay, it's placing that individual in a far higher risk of developing mental illness than others who would not have been in that situation. Okay. So it's a connection of other factors.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one now.
Okay, so you talked about gender. I know that it's also very important. Of course, we all know that in the global society and global environment, female gender tend to be more vulnerable when we talk about mental health issues. If you look at the data available, statistics across the world, not only in Montserrat, the issue of depression and anxiety, more women present for depression and anxiety. And it's explainable. The understanding is just that if you look at the varying culture, women are seen to be the weaker sex. Okay, women are seen to be the sufferers of home. When something goes wrong, they have their children to take care of. Men tend to, internalize a lot of things and try to make sure, they have some shock absorber, to carry on as men. So, but basically, with every adversity, a woman can present in the hospital either with anxiety or depression. So that has made it as high as that. However, there are other conditions like suicide that you see that in terms of total counting or number counting, men complete suicide more than women.
Yeah, so then I wanted to ask a question there then. Is it that women just express more, what's happening with them mentally, how they're feeling on the inside, and it isn't that women suffer with it more.
Which is a combination of the two, which is what we just said. Women are more expressive, externalizing their symptoms.
So isn't that women have more mental health problems than men?
Yes, that may have been as a result of the weakness I've brought out earlier on. I mean, I have issues, emotional issues. I'm trying to mask it off. You see me in suit, I say hello, I smile to everybody. The emotional issue is there. If you have yours, the same moments you have yours, everybody will begin to see it. You externalize it. You can't just keep it. And when we come to the hospital, people will be asking you, do you need to speak to a therapist? And I've been walking up and down with even my own 10 times yours. I'm trying to mask it to be the usual macho man, a man, and I don't want people to see me as a weaker sex. There's so many other factors that is making men not to actually present like women would present. Not necessarily that women have more mental health issues than men, because that has to be straightened away. There are so many men within the communities, even our local communities here, that I could see that they have issues, but they are not presenting, and they are even in denial because that can't happen to me because I'm the man. Okay. So last one that I would like to mention, because these are very important indicators of inequalities in our community in Montserrat here, the issue of the sexual preferences and orientation. I probably would not have brought this up if I had not worked in Montserrat. But I found out that since I've been working here over 2 years now, I've had a couple of individuals with their sexual preferences, their rights and orientation, in the spectrum of LGBT. I found out that quite a lot of cultural and religious practices that do not support that preference, okay? And by so then, even research has shown that such individual would likely develop mental health problems, common one in future, like anxiety and depression, that I would have mentioned. But again, society will still discriminate because it's cultural. The culture in Montserrat, the religious practices in Montserrat do not absolutely support LGBT practice, okay? So that's explainable. So the individuals who are having such sexual preference and orientation are having a very tough time. That's part of the inequalities in the world, okay? Because it's peculiar to Montserrat society alone. So they face a lot of social rejection. And when you face social rejection, I mean, it's becoming accumulated, it's becoming pile up. It can lead to issue of suicide tomorrow and other common mental illness. The biggest of all is the social stigma and discriminations against individuals living with mental health. The reason why we are even talking about what we're talking about this year, based on the inequalities, is because in Montserrat, stigma and discrimination is high for individuals that are living with mental health challenges. And I'm going to tell you, social stigma basically is how we talk to, how we address our actions and inactions, what we say, what we do not say, the way we verbalize. I
like that you mentioned inactions, because
inactions.
Sometimes we think that stigma and discrimination is about you acting out against someone.
Some inaction can even lead to social stigma. It's an indication of social stigma. Let me give you an example. I wrote to a company that I'm looking for a job. I have a schizophrenia, for example. Another person wrote to a company, the same company that is looking for a job. Response was given to the other guy who wrote that is looking for a job. Oh, we will get back to you at a later date. I wrote, nobody responded to me. It's an inaction. Okay, but of course, in my own interpretation, if I get to know that the other guy who wrote and got a response, I begin to think, is it because I live with schizophrenia? Yes, it's because I'm having mental health challenges. This is part of inaction, and that happens in varying conditions. Okay, so it's what you say, the way we treat, the treatment method, how the way we address, the way we relate, communication, relationship with individuals living with mental health challenge can obviously discriminate against them. And then in terms of even job placement, okay, I mean, it's not the same thing. We need to treat individuals living with mental health challenge with their condition, not based on the conditions that are meted out to others who are colleagues within the same work. Okay, Okay, for instance, you have gone on sick leave, perhaps because at a point in time I lapsed or I faced a minor relapse. Coming back to the office, the attitude of my colleague, my co-worker, would mean a lot to me in coming out of relapse. Have they done what they're supposed to do rightly? Their actions and inaction? Is it showing that I'm welcome back into the community or into the environment? So this issue of stigma and discrimination is very, very, and that has also affected the pathway to care. I must mention that because I found out that in terms of doing awareness, most people do not really see mental health issues as mental health issues. The only thing I have seen some individuals considering mental health issues as when you are in full-blown psychosis.
Yes.
And it's even in denial. And when I mentioned about pathways to care, people believe that if it is spiritual, you don't need orthodox intervention. You have to go and pray in the church. And many people are there in the church praying for issue like seizure, issue like autism, issue like mental retardation, issue like so many things without accessing
the care that's needed.
Exactly. So they prefer to use that pathway. And in some cases too, the symptoms of this mental illness are usually underreported. Why? Because of the cultural and religious beliefs of our people. They don't want to own up that it's a symptom of mental illness. We rather prefer that it's a spiritual attack or it's something in culture that somebody did that is now getting punished for it and all that. Rather than attributing that symptoms as symptoms of mental illness, will become very evasive. So these are some of the inequalities that I have noticed in local environments here in Montserrat.
So I want to talk now about bridging the gap. We've identified the inequalities, and I want you to highlight for us the things that we are doing right, because I think it's always important to highlight the positives. So what are we getting right here within the Ministry of Health and even further afield within our community? And then I want to talk a little bit about what can we do better, what are our areas that require major focus, and how do we come together as a community to better support those persons around us living with mental health challenges. So let's start with what are we doing well to decrease that divide, to bridge the gap, and then we'll move on to where a lot of effort is still needed.
Thank you very much. It's interesting to know that in the Ministry of Health, the mental health care is free for every individual. In Montserrat, we have free mental health care services. I described that the consultant psychiatrist would have seen clients, as case may be, the clinical psychologist would have tended from assessment to intervention, the nurses and all that. These services are free for all residents in Montserrat. And that's one way of I know we have bridged the gap as far as we're concerned locally in Montserrat.
And just to highlight one point here, when Mr. Bamisile says free to residents, that means free to every single one as long as you live here. It does not matter where you are from, the service is free to you.
Exactly. The other issue is the issue of legislation and policy that I think would also would have added more value in terms of reducing the inequalities. I'll give you an example. In Ministry of Health, we have a mental health policy which is subject to review intermittently. As far as I know, we ought to have reviewed the latest one, but it's yet to be done. But at least we have a policy that is like a statement, a guiding principle, rules and regulations that we have to follow. That again, we try to put in to reduce the inequality. The issue of legislation is very important, because we're dealing with human beings. If you look at what the World Mental Health Federation has mentioned, bridging on human rights is something that is very significant in terms of inequalities globally.
Yes.
Okay, but in Montserrat, yes, we have a Mental Health Act, which is a form of legislature, but I understand it's too old, and we need to review the Mental Health Act, especially in areas that would protect the professionals that are working.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's one area that needs greater focus.
Yeah, exactly. We need to focus on. Of course, in the issue of discrimination and stigma reduction, it's a community participation. No matter what the mental health team will be able to do, will not suffice unless everybody within the community, all institutions, churches, social organizations, charity organizations, governments, private individuals, come together to speak out and say, yes, we are accepting that we have certain individuals amongst us who are living with mental health challenges, and we are doing all we could do to reduce the issue of stigma and discrimination. It's not peculiar to Montserrat alone. It's a global issue within mental health spectrum. However, in Montserrat, we should be able to do a lot of community participation, and that is why we are doing this awareness. Churches would have to join us, social organizations would have to join us to the extent that we've been seeing improvement. Unlike when I came, individuals are not bold enough to walk into the to the clinic for sessions. But now we begin to see a lot of family, friends, personal referrals over what I used to know when the referrals are coming from government institutions alone, police, the court, the social services. As a matter of fact, I can give you confidently in my own data, more than 50% of referral on a monthly basis are family, friends, personal referrals, which I think is we could applaud, but we could do more.
That is definitely a reason to celebrate, and
exactly.
Hopefully that's something that can be highlighted throughout the course of this week, that we are making strides, it's becoming more personal, people are acting out, they're doing as they should and coming to seek mental health care. That is wonderful, Montserrat, and I just want to applaud you there and to say keep up the good work. Let's keep going.
Thank you. So when you talk about what we could do, advocacy is another thing, and of course I'm making an advocacy as a clinical psychologist, mental health professionals, others are also making advocates. But it doesn't stop at our doorstep. Advocacy should be a community thing too. I would want one day, as we've seen, Association of Diabetics, Association of people living with hypertension, and we're having yearly celebration, having t-shirts, printing it, individuals living with diabetics or hypertension or cancer. I hope to see individuals coming out too. I live with mental challenges, and we have advocacy, we do awareness campaign, we try to tell people to come out. The issue of suicide, we put the risk as minimum. So that is advocacy, and it's not left alone for the professionals alone. That's why I said it's a community participation. So if you can do that, government needs to also create an enabling environment to ensure that individuals who would have come up to say, yes, I live with mental illness, I have depression, I live with anxiety disorder, or I'm a suicide survivor at any point, we'll be free, wear a t-shirt, we have a yearly celebration, and we speak to other people. Survivors will come out and speak. Okay, and it encourages a lot of people that are hiding there, that their family members don't know how to bring them out to come and access treatment, because the treatment is available.
And just to say here, we have an actual advocate, just as Mr. Bamisile has described, someone who is living with a mental illness, and they have been brave enough, courageous enough to speak with us today. So I invite you, our audience, to take a listen to what they have to say about their experience living here locally in Montserrat with a mental illness. Thank you for having this sit down with us here on Talking Health. Can you share your diagnosis and what it's like to live with this condition?
I have no inhibitions about sharing my diagnosis. I have been diagnosed with manic depression, commonly known as bipolar. Also, I was diagnosed in the UK in 2005.
So you've been living with this condition for quite some time. Can you give us a little bit about what it's like so we can understand a little bit better about manic depression, you said?
Yes.
Manic depression and bipolar disorder?
Yes. Living with the condition has its challenges, especially living in a community which is typically misguided and uneducated about the condition I have, bipolar. However, because of my tenacious spirit, I am able to live quite a normal and enjoyable life. So with bipolar, you have moments when you can become depressed. Yes, I just want to make that claim. And also you can become more so enthusiastic and, very lively and very don't want to sleep and that kind of thing. So that's the
So the mood
different
fluctuates.
spectrums of the condition.
Okay.
Yes, the mood
And
fluctuates.
you mentioned that persons here are somewhat uneducated and
Yes.
maybe that makes them a little less empathetic than they
Yes.
should be towards you. And we're here
Yes.
today really to educate and to improve that. I
Yes.
just want to repeat the theme. The theme for the week is mental health in an unequal world. And it speaks about the challenges and the inequities that persons face. And you mentioned, that people aren't aware with about what you're going through. Can you tell us what are some of those challenges? And I also want to talk about what are we getting right as a community to support you and others like you, and where are we failing, and what would you like to see done differently?
Okay. One of the things I think the Montserrat community is doing right? The government is providing free healthcare for those living with mental health challenges, and also the mental health clinic employs a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist, which any member of the community can have free access to. Yes? And I think this should be commended. Yes?
And what about where we are failing and what you would like to see done differently?
A failure I have identified over the years is that the medical staff at the Glendon Hospital, they are not specially trained in mental health. Therefore, cases are not dealt with in the most effective manner then. Yes? They're not empathetic towards the persons because of their inability to
The lack of
empathize.
training.
Yes? And also the training is necessary. So once you don't have that training, you are unable to deal with the situation as it relates to mental illnesses and challenges that one may face.
So then might I suggest that one of the things you would like to see is that our nurses are properly trained
Yes.
in mental health care, even more specialized nurses?
Yes, that is correct.
And I think presently we just have about 2 mental health nurses working. However, none of them are posted at the hospital. So this is an opportunity. We're hearing from an actual person here who is advocating for their own mental health, that is something they would like to see done differently. Is there anything else you would like to see maybe from the wider community?
Many persons are not educated on what mental health entails. So I just want to say here, anyone can succumb to mental health challenges. Persons need to educate themselves instead of labeling and casting judgment. What needs to be done differently is that the mental health department, they need to spearhead better awareness programs to sensitize the general public, on mental health and how it impacts our society.
I also want to say people need to be open to it, open to learning, open to understanding. As you said, understanding without judgment is very, very, very important.
Yes.
Because it really could be any one of us.
Yes.
So Kimora, you are here today as an advocate for your community. Speaking up is extremely brave, and others are reluctant to do so out of fear of being judged negatively. Why have you made this decision to speak out? And what would you say to encourage others to do the same?
I have made this decision because I am, anyone who knows me, knows that I am very transparent as it relates to my illness or my condition, as I would like to call it. And so I saw this platform as an avenue where I can help sensitize the Montserrat community on the importance of good mental health or proper mental health, and give my thoughts on how the inequities can be eradicated. Yes, as the theme for this year speaks about inequities, I just wanted to shed some light on how they can be eradicated.
And absolutely, thank you for doing so. I think you've highlighted some very key areas. Just to recap, she mentioned better staff training so that our nurses can better handle persons living with mental illnesses. She also mentioned our mental health team being a greater part of the community when it comes to education, and you, our community members, listening without bias and judgment. And I think these are extremely great areas where we can improve and do better. Can you say a word of encouragement to someone who might be listening to you? They're also living with a mental health condition and they want to speak out but are afraid. What would you say to someone like that?
What I'll say is that they're not alone. There's no need to be fearful about speaking out because we here on Montserrat need to join forces and change the landscape of mental health awareness. So if persons voice that they have a certain mental health challenge, be it anxiety, depression, it comes in all sorts of forms. Support groups can be created to alleviate the energies, the low energy feelings that come with the territory of mental health illness.
Yes, so persons speak out. You are not alone, and I think there's no greater advocate than someone who is in the situation.
Yes.
You know, those of us on the outside looking in, yes, we can play a supportive role, but really the forefront has to be the voice of people living with mental health challenges. So as Kimora said, I want to encourage you to speak out. You're not alone, and join forces. Support groups, that's another great way that we can help handle some of the challenges and the inequities that persons face. Any final thoughts that you wish to share with our audience before we say goodbye?
Yes, I'll just like to emphasize here that anyone can face a mental health challenge. These challenges are no respecters of persons. However, the good news is that anyone can live a fully normal life with such conditions. I am a living example. Subsequent to being diagnosed, I was able to complete my degree in accounting with upper second class honors, and I also did this while working full time. So anything is possible with these conditions. You just have to have the support, the viable support system in place, and you can make it. And another thing I would like to say is do not be ashamed of your mental health condition or challenge. Millions of people around the world face these challenges on a day-to-day basis, and they're not stigmatized because these persons are aware of what it entails and are more educated and better able to empathize. So education is key. Finally, if you feel that you may be suffering from a mental health issue, you may seek professional help. Yes, so there's the mental health unit. You can go and seek help there.
Yes. So thank you very much once again for coming and sit down and have this chat. It was
You're
really
welcome.
great hearing from you and getting to know you a little bit better.
Yes.
And I hope to hear your voice much more, and I hope that others come out and join forces with you as we seek to better the lives of persons living with mental health challenges here in Montserrat. So, Mr. Bamisile, we just heard from Kimowa Ward. She has been living with mental illness here in Montserrat, and she was able to share a little bit of her experience with us. I just want to say thank you to her for doing that, for speaking up and speaking for her community, for herself. It's a hugely brave thing to do. What do you think about what she just said? And can you once again emphasize the need for persons living with mental illness to be brave enough to join her and to speak up about what is happening with them?
Well, let me first of all thank Kim for being taking a leadership role in advocating for individuals living with mental health challenge. I keep saying it. We cannot eradicate the issue of stigma and discrimination unless we have people who are sufferers coming out to speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. When we look at the way our community, our family members, our friends stigmatize, but when the sufferers themselves come out and speak for themselves, what else do we need to say about them? They have identified with it. They have come out openly. They have said, yes, we live with this challenge, but we want to better our lot. And we want to encourage others who are in the hidden to come out, join us, so that we can fight this scourge. Mm-hmm. There is no any other opinion I have as non-sufferer. There's no any other opinion family members have as non-sufferer. So she's taking the bull by the horn. I commend a step. I can only say that we need more individuals who are having such experiences to come out and speak about these challenges and how far they have been to. And like I said earlier on, that will go a long way in eradicating this issue of stigma and discriminations. Mm-hmm. Like you have seen in the Western world, there are all kinds of associations. Mm-hmm. Individuals living with bipolar disorder, individuals living with schizophrenia, suicide survivor and all that. But they were able to do that because they have actually defeated the myths in their culture that stigmatize and discriminate against individual with mental health challenges.
Just to say here, we, the community, we have to do our part and make it a safe space for persons to speak up. So I hope throughout the coming week, October 10th, that we can show love to others who we know are struggling with mental health illness, stand with them, support them, and allow them to be themselves and to speak up and represent their own challenges, because that's the only way, as Mr. Bamisile said, that we can really get to the meat of the problem and bridge that divide and end some of those inequalities. I want to turn our attention now to the upcoming week. I know, as I mentioned before, there's an entire week of activities. Can you tell us what those activities are and tell our public how can they get involved? Where can they find the mental health unit throughout the week of October 10?
Okay, thank you, Penny. The October entirely from 1st till 31st is World Mental Health Month, but specifically the World Mental Health Federation has chosen 10th of October as the World Mental Health Day. It's on a Sunday for this 221 celebration. But we have a couple of activities we will be executing to also celebrate locally in Montserrat. We are hoping that before October 10, there will be a media address or broadcast by His Excellency the Governor of Montserrat, and of course the Minister of Health, Honorable Charles Kennon, in their own right, to join in solidarizing with members who are living with mental health challenges, and to also make a message of hope, encouraging the members of public and populate to please come out to celebrate with us, and of course reduce stigma and discrimination. That will go on. On October 10th, which is a Sunday, we usually have the tradition of having few of our individuals or clients living with mental health challenges to fellowship with us in the church. So this year we will be going to Church of God Prophecy to do our Thanksgiving and fellowship with the church community, along with a few clients who are living with mental health challenges. That event will come on Sunday, and of course there will be an awareness program that we're having now on the radio or whatever, to actually educate members of the community and the entire community about mental health, and of course particularly how we need to eradicate the issue of stigma and discrimination. On Monday, the 11th of October, because we have been advocating for community participation, how do we do our own part to ensure that we reach out to the community? So we will be having, for a couple of hours, community outreach programs where we will have information on a pamphlet to be given to members of the community, talk to them about mental health, and of course the issue of stigma and discrimination, identify with people who are living with these challenges. And of course this time around, because we're trying to bridge the gap between the multi-ethnic community, so we're going to have these pamphlet messages in English language, in Creole language, and in Spanish language. So we'll be able to cut across all the ethnic groups in Montserrat to actually tell them about mental health challenges and how to reduce stigma, what they need to do, what is discrimination, how will they avoid discrimination, how will they avoid stigma. So we'll be having that event on 11th of October.
And where will that be located?
Somewhere at bakery at Braids.
Economy Bakery.
Economy
Braids.
Bakery, exactly, community, because we have identified that place as a place where so many people come to around lunch or proud to lunch to have one activities or the other. So we try to speak to people. We have a tent there, we'll sit down, 2-3 minutes, will not take much of their time. We give them pamphlet, we educate them. And the idea is to go back to the community because we are unable to reach everybody on that day. So those that will benefit from that program will please, like a multiplier effect, pass the message on to other members of the community. Those who can listen to the radio would have heard on the radio. So we intend to do that by God's grace. Few activities just to mark our own week, and hopefully next year we'll do better than that.
Okay, so you heard it from Mr. Bamisile. You can join the mental health team and others living with mental health illness on Sunday, October the 10th at Church of God of Prophecy, fellowship with them, give thanks for life, ask God for the strength to support. You can join. The church is open to the entire public. And on Monday, the 11th of October, you can look out for the mental health team by the Economy Bakery. They'll be under the big blue and white tent, Ministry of Health. will be pasted onto the tent, and interact with the team, ask questions, encourage persons from all the communities in Montserrat, no matter what language they speak. There's something there for everybody. So look out for them there. If you have a question about mental health, you can come out and speak to them there. And again, you can listen to the radio throughout the week. You're going to hear messages from the mental health team. And I also want to add that during that week, let's try to wear as much green as possible. I know our Green Week is usually in March. However, the color that represents mental health awareness is green. And because I know Montserrat has a Green Week, I know that everybody has something green in their wardrobes, their closets that they can pull out and wear throughout the course of the week. So once again, we have Mental Health Week. The theme is mental health in an unequal world. And I encourage all of you, my listeners, my viewers, to celebrate with the mental health team and raise awareness about mental health and wellness. Any final words from you, Mr. Bamisile?
Well, just a short one. We have acknowledged the fact that mental health is in an unequal world, but together we can make a difference. So this togetherness is something that everybody will have to partake in our rights. So I'm appealing to members of the community to bring up the spirit of togetherness, to join us in celebrating, and of course in our future endeavors to also join us, so that we would be able to put stigma and discrimination to the barest minimum. In Montserrat. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for joining me today on Talking Health. Thank you, of course, to our listeners and viewers, and to our GIU team for making this televised program possible. And of course, thank you to our sponsor, United Insurance. This is goodbye from Talking Health, and I'll see you again next week.